Alright, let's do this one more time. My name's Ross, I reviewed the M5s, made some shorts and proclaimed it was a great printer, and I stand by that so long as what you're looking for is speed. I inferred that the case of the softness in these prints came from the new ACF film used on that printer. In the case of the M5 I'm about to show you, we're back to the more traditional NFEP. Does that make a difference? Well, if you want to know, it's a good job I review printers, and at least for the last year or so, I've been the one and only faux hammer. Okay, so I've got to ask, please forgive the arrogance of the thumbnail, but just allow me the courtesy of showing off a little bit of a win. It's genuinely empowering to finally feel like I know enough about these printers that I can make a prediction and validate it. Because trust me, even after all this time, I can still feel a little lost in the woods. The M5 is another entry into the 10-inch 12K market for Anycubic, but it's not quite a true 12K because the pixels are rectangular. The screen is still 16:9 in aspect ratio, but due to these elongated pixels on the y-axis, the resolution is 11520 by only 5120. And whilst the screen is advertised at being 10.1 inch, the actual display area is only 9.85 inches. But I've learned since my last review that LCD screen sizes are measured by the glass area, not the full display area, and they've always been doing this, I've just never checked it before. All of this slight massaging of the numbers isn't new, and it's something that all the brands touting 10-inch 12K capable printers are all doing. But still, with that in mind, we can re-evaluate the size of the pixels on this printer. As I've said many times in previous videos, stop comparing the resolution of a printer, stop comparing 2K, 4K, 8K, 12K, etc. You need to compare either the pixels per inch, or, as has been more commonly adopted, the size of an LCD's individual pixels, which in this case are advertised as 19 on the x-axis and 24 on the y-axis. It's easy to do this yourself with any printer, simply divide the millimeters on an axis by the number of pixels on the same. On the M5 we'll see that X is actually 18.9 microns and Y is almost dead on 24 microns. But which of these values do we use to compare to other printers? Is this a 19 micron printer or is it 24? Well, even if you're printing the flattest, smoothest wall you possibly could in theory, one side of this is still going to be 24 microns thick. So these printers can only be measured by the weakest value. So I'm calling all of these current 10-inch 12K printers 24 micron printers just to stop the confusion. And this is usually enough of a value to compare with other printers and determine which one will provide sharper quality. Usually. I'm going to come back to that in a sec. Also, if you watch any of my videos and decide to buy printers, please could you consider clicking on the affiliate links in the video description before you purchase. This earns us a commission at no cost to you. I'm just putting this out there because so many people send comments of thanks and advise of a purchase, but didn't even realise that this was how we get paid by manufacturers. Actually, anything you buy from any of the links down below will earn us a commission, doesn't have to be a printer, but again, I just want to say thank you. If you want to thank us without costing you any more money, that's a great way to do it, cheers. With this printer, unboxing is straightforward, though you do lift it vertically out the top of the box, which is only mildly more cumbersome when compared to other brands that allow the printer to just slide out onto a worktop horizontally. It is quite a plasticky printer, which is most obvious on the base, as the printer only has LPL support. On any smooth surface, just trying to unscrew the bolt for the vat can cause it to slide. But mechanically though, it both looks, feels, and seems like it's a solid unit. The build plate is laser etched and has a more traditional leveling mechanism than the M5s, which I'll come back to shortly. The stability of the unit is sound, with its dual linear rails and a solid C-frame. And the vat is great. For a printer this large, it's great to have something this deep in order to store more resin for longer and larger prints. As previously mentioned, this comes equipped with the NFEP release film rather than the ACF of the other printer. Basically, this is a more traditional, clear film. And as a nice Brucey bonus, the printer does come with a screen protector and an installation kit, though this is once again oversized, which means we get air pockets around the edge of the display. Though, following my M5s video, Anycubic have directly advised me that the pressure of the Titan vat pushing down on the screen protector will close the gaps. I have no way to measure or validate this, but I suspect it's a minuscule issue and only potentially affects the very edges of the screen and potentially none of the printable area. Long story short, I haven't seen this cause an issue. UI-wise, I was surprised to see that this was different to the M5s, and it's similar in style to my older M3 Premium. It's not bad, and it's certainly still much sexier of a UI than Anycubic's direct competitor, and everything is easily laid out. One of my favourite features of both M5 printers, and this is minor, but it's the ability to tell the printer to raise and lower the bed in 50mm increments rather than the 10 that others are limited to. And levelling here, it's not automated like on the M5s, but it is easy. Loosen the bolts, send it to home, tighten the bolts in alternating corners whilst pressing down evenly on the bed, and then press Z equals 0. Done. And yes, I always do this with the VAT and release film in now because it's so much easier and it seems to work for me every time. And the M5 also has built-in Wi-Fi, but there's no remote control features I could find. This just links it to your network and then to the Anycubic phone app. When it comes to printing, this time Anycubic sent me some of their DLP Craftsman resin. Why? Because it's my favourite resin and it's what I asked for to test this printer. I dialed this resin into the correct exposure times really easily thanks to Anycubic's RERF feature, which is a great feature on Anycubic printers because it lets me test 8 different exposure times on any small model in a single print. Each model in this case is my preferred exposure test and has a 0.25 second difference in exposure between them. And since Anycubic clearly aren't going to do anything to help us understand how this feature works properly, I'm going to make my own video soon, so make sure you subscribe and don't miss it because it is really simple and super useful on their printers. Now, this DLP Craftsman resin isn't the sharpest, but I genuinely don't care that much about sharpness when it comes to prints I actually want to use, such as miniatures. Many of your sharper resins, which I'll thoroughly test shortly, are far too brittle and small components will often snap. With this stuff, I find it's much more flexible after its final cure and can easily be scraped down in an almost similar fashion to HIPS plastics, you know, the vacuum form stuff that you usually get on sprues. But I do find this is still quite sharp and I do like the texture of the finish. I'd confidently say though it's on the top end of good enough for miniatures despite it being unable to render some of the tiniest details. But I'm sure nobody's looking at these models and thinking any of them are bad prints at all. And I want to make that clear before we come on to the meat of the video because I'll be coming back to it. So when it comes to testing on this printer, I think the main question I've seen from people is, are prints on the M5 more detailed than on the M5s? And I'm here to tell you that yes they are. Let me show you the evidence in the form of exposure tests because I printed a lot of them. And once again for these tests I'm using Frozen's 8K Aqua Grey resin. Despite its aforementioned brittleness, it's still, along with Sorayatek's fast resin, one of the best for showcasing what a printer can truly render. These images are the best way to compare the results of my exposure tests because I can overlay them and show you the direct difference visually in a video. So, as mentioned, when we compare the M5 in its raw settings to the M5s, you can clearly see that not only does this render more of the fanes on the bottom of this exposure test, but also more gaps and has sharper definition on the opposing side too. And if you need more detail on why this is the perfect XP finder and how to use it, check out my printer setup video linked below and the title card above. But anyway, for a reason I'll share shortly, I wanted to see if we could improve the M5 print settings even further. My next test was after removing the screen protector to see if this had any impact, but if it did, I didn't notice any. So I then wondered, could there be some sort of compression issues? And so I added a 1mm raft under the exposure test, but once again, no significant difference. But then I thought, well, technically I should now re-level the printer now that the screen protector is removed, so I did this with the VAT in and the resin in. And yeah, like I said earlier, this saves so much time when re-leveling a printer. But the result is, once again, no significant difference. And for those of you who've watched my previous videos, you probably already know why I'm doing so many different tests expecting different results, but I'll reveal it to everyone after just a couple more tests. So the next thing I wanted to try was reducing the light intensity by 33%. On all my previous printers, the best exposure time for this particular resin was 1.5 seconds. On this printer it's 1 second. So I expected that reducing the intensity by a third would require the exposure time to go back up to 1.5 seconds for the best averaged out exposure. That makes sense, right? But since I couldn't even find an option to do this anywhere in Photon Workshop, I had to use Chitubox, which at least had the setting available. But when printing this at 1.5 seconds, it was still overexposed. Because I'd sliced in Chitubox, I couldn't use the REF feature, so I printed it again at 1 second, and the result was all but the same as all the other tests. So I can only assume this didn't work, and there's no way currently to reduce light intensity on this printer. So anyway, one final test I thought to try to improve the sharpness was to reduce the temperature of the printer. Now, I used to have a problem like many people, printing in a room that was far too cold, but since I've had it insulated and it's now British summertime, it's far too warm in here. And so I let the printer cool back down to around 25 degrees and printed it again. But again, not much of a change. So when I compare the first M5 to the last, you can just about see some difference. It's only slight, but it seems maybe each of these steps have done a little something. But I wanted to show you everything I went through before making my next point. Because whilst prints on the 12K M5 are clearly sharper than the M5s, look what we get when we compare these prints to prints from my older M3 Premium. The 8K M3 Premium is even sharper. For more details on this printer and similar printers, I'll add a pop-up link above and also in the description below so you can learn more about them. But with this concern, I did reach out to Anycubic with my findings because prints are appearing softer on this printer than on the older Anycubic model. Even the Mono 2 I recently reviewed was capable of prints sharper than what I'm seeing here. So this is where Anycubic clarified and told me to make the prints look better, the M5 series has optimized the anti-aliasing effect with the support of the light and the screen. The M5 is able to print models with a more glossy surface. As a result, the models printed on the M5 series do not look as sharp as our 8K printers. And I can certainly see that smoothness. Despite having no anti-aliasing applied, prints here still look smooth on both flat geometric surfaces and rounded curved models. So whilst this is still technically a 12K screen, the focus of this printer is on making your prints look smooth. Layer and voxel lines are frequently almost impossible to detect. Practically speaking, none of these prints look bad, and I doubt anyone would be disappointed with the results. We're now well beyond any huge bump in resolution having any significant impact on print results. And as I showed earlier in the video and wanted to stress, for everything I print and actually use, I'm a big fan of the DLP Craftsman resin, and looking back at those exposure tests, even at their best, those results are worse than any of my M5 or M5s tests. So honestly, you need to make a serious consideration as to what resin you're going to be using before making a huge judgment on any printer with sub 35 micron pixels. Unless you're going for ultra sharp, high detail and usually brittle resin, does any of this even matter? Let me know in the comments. And yeah, I am aware that people are still eager to know whether or not you can get the M5 quality on the M5s, assuming of course you change the ACF film for the FEP. But we're more than out of time for this video, and this printer required its own dedicated review as part of why Anycubic send me free printers. But for those of you watching this video as soon as it comes out, I'm not going to keep you waiting long. I am going to cover this ASAP, and it will be my next video when I'm comparing the M5 to the M5s. As always, thanks for watching, and an even bigger thanks to our patrons who get their name up in the credits, early access to all our content, and help support the channel. Don't forget, if you're buying one of these printers, I'd really appreciate you hitting the links down below before you make any purchase to anybody who's linked in the description. Until next time, be excellent to each other. Fohammer out.